Afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. We've got a great panel lined up today. I'm very excited to do this after 18 months, for obvious reasons, of being in my basement all the time. This is definitely the most interesting thing I've done here. My name's Matt Gurney. I'm a journalist. I'm based in Toronto. I'm the co-founder of The Line, an online magazine. I'm a columnist for the National Post and TVO. I'm a radio host on SiriusXM, and I'm a space geek within easy reach. Where to go? Yeah, I've got my 1990s vintage Playmates Starfleet communicator in perfect working condition, I'd add. So, I'm overawed and very impressed by the people we have on the panel today. Like, I'm a space nerd, but I have terrible eyesight and I'm terrible at math. So, like, I was always going to be very much grounded here on planet Earth. So I like to talk about this stuff. But I always been as an observer, and my job today as moderator is to keep a conversation flowing, bring out the insights and the expertise of this great panel we have, and largely to shut up. But I mean, I get paid to speak for a living, so I'm gonna indulge myself for just 1 minute. I want to make one point, guys, before we jump into this. We have been living, as I noted with that joke about being here in my basement for the last 18 months. We're living in, as the cliche would tell us, that we're all tired of hearing of. We're living in challenging times. It's been a difficult 18 months. The pandemic looms large, of course, but there's been geopolitical issues. There's obviously a concern about the environment, climate change, wildfires here in Canada. A lot of the enduring problems we've had, we still have, and we have some new ones as well. And other than really bumming everybody out at the start of the panel, I raise this for an important reason. We actually do have good news that's out there. And I've had this feeling over the last 18 months that it's getting buried a lot under all the bad news. And I understand why. I mean, as I said, these are the cliched, unprecedented times. But there are a couple of things out there that we can easily lose sight of how fact they're going well. The mRNA technology that we were hoping to use to end this pandemic is obviously something that has incredible applications. I think we're just beginning to really tap. The one I'm probably the most excited on, though, is that we're having leaps and bounds in our progress. I just don't mean Canadians. I mean, as a species, as humanity, in our space travel capabilities. And I know this has been something we've been talking about throughout today's events, and I don't have any particular expertise to offer, but I will say this. I mean, as a very young boy up north of Toronto, away from the city lights, I had this moment where my dad took me outside to see the stars, and one of them was moving. And it wasn't a shooting star, because we'd seen those before. It was a satellite. And I thought to myself, we must have just had the perfect view for it. The sun must have been perfectly positioned, because we had a nice, long, bright reflection, and it moved right across the horizon, and we could watch it for a couple of minutes. And guys, I was hooked. Like, I mean, ever since then, and then only again, a 6'4" guy with terrible eyesight and bad math does not get to go to space. But we're looking at an era right now where I'm genuinely optimistic that my kids might view space travel in a very different way that I do and that I grew up. And I think over the last year and a bit, for obvious reasons, we've made incredible strides that have probably not gotten the recognition they deserve. I think this is a great opportunity for us all today to actually talk a little bit about that and talk about some of where we are, where we've come from, and hopefully where we're going next. So I expect that will be the most anyone here will hear from me today, and then we'll move on and we'll bring in the big guns here. I want to introduce the panel. We're very lucky today to have a great group of people to talk about this. We have Stephen Mateer here, President and CEO of Maritime Launch Services Canada. And guys, I am reading from notes. I don't want to mangle anyone's title. I've been covering the election for weeks. I'm amazed I just didn't all introduce you as Liberal leader Justin Trudeau or something like that. So I want to get these titles right. We also have Michèle Beck, Senior Vice President for Canadian Sales at Telesat. Dr. Dave Williams, retired Canadian astronaut, and now the CEO of Leap Biosystems. And of course, Dr. Jinjun Shan of York University, professor and chair of the Earth and Space Science engineering team there. So guys, thank you all for being here today. I didn't introduce any of you as party leaders, which, that's a relief to get that off my chest. Let's talk some space, guys. Let's talk a little bit about where we are as a country, and then we can talk a little bit about how that fits in with the global reality of this. Canada is a country that is often talked of punching above its weight. This is something we talk about a lot, and we're hearing about it again on the the election trail, right? The middle power, the G7 country, the moral superpower. We all know the cliches. Something that is often not appreciated is that Canada genuinely is an advanced space nation. I was just looking at reports of the NASA wanting to build that new lunar outpost, the orbiting outpost. We're in the front lines of that. We were the first country to be signed up for that, and this is just incredible stuff here. I want to bring in the panel here with just one comment to the audience before we get into this. We will be taking questions. We will do a Q&A at the end of the hour in a bit, but for right now, I want to bring in our experts. Dr. Shan, I think I'll come to you first. I don't have any specific questions to ask of you, except for all of you. Tell us a little bit about your backgrounds, your interest in this, and also, if you don't mind, give me a sense of where we are today, or the lay of the land, so to speak.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Jinjun Shan. I'm the professor of space engineer and department chair, as Matt mentioned, at York University. As some of you know, York is the home to the only undergraduate space engineering program in Canada. And our program started the same year when Canadarm2 started servicing the International Space Station, which is 2001 actually. And this September marks the 20th anniversary of our program. So as we know, so Canada has a long history in space program, and we are the third country to launch a satellite to the orbit just before the Soviet Union and the United States. So we have made an impressive contribution to space community. However, as we discussed before, and so the future is not guaranteed. So I think we must continue to advocate for and pursue space exploration, education, and innovation. So I'm very happy to join this panel discussion and look forward to discuss on how Canada can maintain and grow its leadership position in the final frontier in space.
Matt, I think you're on mute.
Pardon me, I am. My bad. I've only been doing this for a year and a half. I guess I got a few more tricks to learn. Dr. Williams, I'll throw this over to you now. I assume that's a very impressive background behind you, and that you're not actually in orbit right now. If so, and if that was covered by the conference, I feel very ripped off here. Tell me, I mean, obviously you have a unique insight to this. You've been to space a couple of times, which is a couple times more than I have. Now here on planet Earth, we're talking about what comes next for us as humans, but also as Canadians. We got a lot to talk about today. I guess we'll start with the same question. What's your overall read of the lay of the land?
Well, first of all, today's a really exciting day. Lots of coverage of the Inspiration 4 crew. This whole era of private space travel is upon us right now. Matt, to your earlier point, it's been a tough year and a half. And the path forward from the recovery of COVID is based on international collaboration. The work that was done in developing the vaccinations came from a result of international academic collaboration. That is one of the greatest single messages of the International Space Station. The International Space Station is all about working together collaboratively with the major spacefaring nations from around the world, working in space to further understand the world in which we live. And I think one of the key elements of this, of course, is Canada is a major spacefaring nation. We were the third country in the world to launch satellites into space. We have a breadth of expertise in space technology, from satellite telecommunication, Earth observation satellites, remote sensing capabilities, to human spaceflight, space robotics. We could go on, but there's absolutely no question Canada's a major spacefaring nation. Many people, though, are wondering, like, how does this apply to our current situation? It's a tough time right now on Earth. Well, I think one thing that's on everyone's mind is post-COVID economic recovery. And right now, the global space economy is $350 billion, growing to in excess of $1.1 trillion over the next 20 years. We want to be part of that. I actually think that Canada should aspire to being 10% of the global space economy. Right now, we're about $5.5 billion. We could grow to 35 billion, and imagine growing to 100 billion over the next 20 years. That's new jobs, new economic growth, new innovation as a tremendous stimulus. So I think it's a really exciting time. We're looking forward to lunar return, seeing a Canadian astronaut involved in lunar return, seeing Canadian technology involved in supporting lunar return. So it's really a critical opportunity for Canada right now to continue its expertise as a major spacefaring nation, as we have all these private sector companies growing in the United States. And I think we're seeing more of private sector companies, arguably like Leap Biosystems, coming into existence in Canada, all driven by the excitement and the passion, the expertise we have in space exploration.
Well, you'd mentioned, Dave, you mentioned there the mRNA vaccines. I had an extremely Canadian pandemic experience where this massive global collaborative effort ended up with me sitting in a hockey rink getting vaccinated by a nurse. And I thought to myself, what a very on-brand way to end this. Stephen, I'll invite you to join us now and just to offer your thoughts. This is obviously, as David mentioned, this is not just about kind of preserving our current momentum. We do have a recovery period to come. One of the things I also just find fascinating is the role telecommunications technology in particular, much of it space-based, has played in the last 18 months. Look at us talking at light speed from all over the place. You're using, some of it ground-based, but some of it space-based as well. There's huge opportunities for us now. It's going to be a matter of, I think, identifying those opportunities and actually then reaching out and grabbing some of them.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I appreciate the question. I'd like to introduce myself here briefly. I'm Steve Mateer, President and CEO of Maritime Launch Services. My background is an engineer for the last 30 years. I began working as a contractor to NASA, working on the space shuttle program, testing propulsion systems for NASA, dealing with flight hardware, and basically providing things for Dr. Williams to be able to fly safely. So I started that road in 1989, and I'm thrilled to be a part of this program continuing today. The last half of my career I spent working in the spaceport regulatory framework in the United States, working on FAA regulatory licenses with a number of companies and entities. And so that's kind of what formulated this opportunity for me to bring Maritime Launch Services as an opportunity for Canada to consider. We really are on the cusp of change. Since the last shuttle flight in 2011, 2012, governments have ceded low Earth orbit to commercial. And commercial has stepped in, just as Dr. Williams said, it's growing by leaps and bounds. And it really is that mark in time when they've ceded that to us, the commercial entities. Our spaceport development in particular is a commercial spaceport. It is going to be disruptive, what we're doing. It is not the federal ranges in the United States and other places globally. This is one that is geared to be able to be responsive to the satellite community. We've been very fortunate right now to get to this point where we're looking towards our groundbreaking later this year. But that's really in part to the fact that we've got 8 or 9 different letters of intent from clients that want to launch their satellites with us. We've got an inclination range of 45 degrees to 98 degrees polar sun synchronous orbit, a huge range of inclinations that are really important for this constellation industry. As Dan Goldberg mentioned today, earlier today, it'd be great to have, fantastic for us to have a launch capability in Canada. Well, it is coming, and it's because where we are specifically. The Chapman report that was released in 1967, that really was fundamentally a big part of our space program going forward here in Canada. It had 3 major precepts in there. One was starting up of a space agency. One was starting up with the telecommunications, which Dan mentioned started in 2 years later in 1969. But the part that kind of got missed in there is the Chapman report said, hey, leave the geosynchronous orbit stuff to the United States and everything else. But what got lost is that we need small launcher, medium launcher capability in Canada for orbital or for global broadband opportunities. So we're at this real cusp with this opportunity here, with this huge satellite community that's already here in North America, specifically in Canada, that I think we are really on that cusp of heading, just as Dr. Williams has described, to have a really large impact on our global market going forward.
Michèle, I'd love to bring you in now. It was just to really build on something that Stephen was saying there. Obviously, please introduce yourself and tell us your perspective. But the idea of that global broadband capability, I find fascinating, and I know this is something you guys have looked at as well. One of the things we've discovered over the last year and a half is that about 90%, I'm rounding off a bit, about 90% of Canadians has access to really good, solid urban to suburban broadband. That remaining 10% was cut off from civilization for the last year and a half. Children who are trying to Zoom in school with leggy internet connections that are constantly dropping out. And something that here I am based in the Greater Toronto area, people don't understand actually how quickly that ground-based terrestrial network stops. There are people in the GTA who, on a nice clear night, can probably see the blinking lights of the CN Tower, but they do not have reliable wired high-speed internet into their subdivision here. So these are challenges we knew about before. We've talked about them before. They were laid bare these last 18 months. So Michèle, take it from here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role here, and obviously we'll welcome your thoughts, and we'll jump into our first conversation.
Great. Well, thanks for the intro. I'm pleased to be participating in this discussion, and thanks very much for the opportunity to actually participate. Michèle Beck, I'm the Senior Vice President, Canadian Sales at Telesat. I am an engineer by trade. I started my career here at Telesat over 30 years ago in the engineering department, and it was called broadband development at the time. So very apropos. I spent my entire career in the telecommunications industry, with the majority of that time spent in satellite communications here at Telesat. Telesat is a pioneer in the provision of satellite communications. We've created a really long history of industry firsts. We were created by an act of parliament in 1969. So, government recognized certainly the benefits of the technology and the capabilities and the benefits that it would deliver to Canada as a whole. We launched the first satellite in 1972, and we haven't looked back since. Only forward, leading the industry and the global industry with a number of innovations that we developed here in Canada. And we actually transformed the satellite industry globally. We're a proud Canadian company, a proud Canadian success story. We started as domestic satellite service provider, and we grew to become a major operator in the global satellite market. We've evolved our product offering over time, and we're just on the cusp of launching our biggest, most ambitious program ever, and that's Telesat Lightspeed, our low Earth orbit constellation of satellites. It will deliver state-of-the-art broadband connectivity to any point on Earth globally, be it the poles over any ocean, and we can deliver, multiple gigabits worth of connectivity to any single point on Earth. So this is something that really is not available today. So this program has been supported as well, I'd like to highlight that, by the Canadian government, by the Quebec and Ontario provincial governments. They've helped to support it, and they've helped to maintain our leadership role in the new space economy here in Canada, creating and maintaining jobs, driving really significant economic benefit in all regions of Canada. That gets materialized through this bridging the digital divide, bringing that connectivity to all regions and underserved regions of Canada so that they can grow and and prosper, they can take advantage of the digital economy. That's what space and the new space economy does. It's not just focus on sort of, the space-based companies. There are benefits that go certainly a lot broader than what's available just in tech and producing the technology. So I'm looking forward to the discussion in more detail throughout the session.
Well, thanks very much to Michèle and to all of you. And it's funny, I had some notes prepared. I like to come at least reasonably prepared to these things, and I feel like we've actually begun to cover a lot of it already. The origins of Canada as a country with a disproportionate presence in space. And you've heard it said of other countries that they have too much history. And of course, Canada has too much geography, and space was a way we were able to offset some of those challenges. And it's always struck me as amazing. Michèle, you mentioned gigabit capacity anywhere on the Earth. I remember to the day I got a cable internet connection at my house, because downloading songs went from an hour-long ordeal to just a couple of minutes. Downloading them legal, of course. Legally, I'd like to stress to anyone who's listening. To then see my own kids, less than one lifetime later, my own kids wandering around the house talking to their Googles and having every song in the world just available to them, right? Like the bandwidth requirements that we have and we take for granted are incredible. And the infrastructure required to sustain them is amazing. And I don't think it's remarked upon enough. Let's talk a little bit about the origins, though. Again, I had these notes here, but we've covered so much of this here. I'm interested in getting all of your thoughts on where we came from. And Stephen and Michèle, you've mentioned a bit about this already, and Dave and Jinjun as well. It's come up. Key steps for you guys in bringing us to where we are today. We're talking a little bit about our past, kind of what brought us to the present here, and I guess we'll kind of repeat the order we started in. So Professor Shan, in terms of key milestones from your perspective on getting us here, what were the things Canada got right? And we've heard a couple of things already. We've talked about the role of government, the role of quickly identifying how Canada could work with our larger ally to do this. In terms of bringing us to where we are today, what would you identify as something that was critical in developing not just global capacity, but specifically Canadian capacity?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question. And as we know, we launched our first satellite in 1962. And between 1962 and 1971, Canada launched 4 Elevate and ISS satellite to study the ionosphere, which is long before we had a space agency. We were also then launching Canadian-built rockets from Churchill, Manitoba. The agencies involved was the Department of Defense and the National Research Council, NRC. So actually, we do have a long space history. So since you asked me what do we do right? So I would say 2 things to make Canada a global leader in the space. One is government investment. The other one is the people we have. So if we look at the other countries with successful space programs, for example, US, NASA's budget has been around $20 billion in the past 10 years, with a constant increase about 0.5% each year. And in 2021, this year, NASA's budget has been $25.2 billion, which is about a 12% increase over fiscal year 2020, which is amazing. So the other one basically is the people or highly qualified personnel, HQP. That is the word we use in academia. So they are the key part of the equation for scientific discoveries, decision making, and for building a foundation for economic growth and social progress. So we have been so fortunate in Canada to have so many dedicated people in space sector who made Canada a global leader in space. So this is my thought.
And I think it's a great thought, and Stephen, it leads kind of naturally into where I was planning to come to you, because in your opening remarks, you had said something I thought was interesting, and you had a bit of a smile on your face there. So I wonder if there's some maybe stories we won't be hearing today. But you talked about the work that you and your guys were doing so that Dave and his guys were able to navigate and stay safe up there. We've been doing this for a while, and earlier in the conversation, it already come up that the shuttles have been retired 10 years. I mean, I remember writing that column and naively thinking, well, we think we'll have the replacements ready in 3 years, but it'll probably be more like 6. Well, and here we are, right? We're just kind of finally starting to really get back. In terms of how we got here today, I mean, I'm curious to hear you and Dave actually go back and forth a bit on this. What were we doing when you were coming up? What were we doing when you were helping Dave and his colleagues stay safe up there? What brought us from even that trajectory? We've talked a little about, the first satellites in the 60s and 70s. In the 80s and the 90s, we were building the foundations for the space economy that we have today.
Well, I think one of the things we really did right was having us participate in the astronaut program with the space shuttle program. I think going back to Dr. Bondar and her first mission with Canada, that was a real key piece for us that really did a couple of things. It got the attention of the community across Canada that we belong in this business. It got kids looking up into space and realizing what the potentials are and what they can do. We're clearly hitting above our weight when it comes to the universities across Canada that are developing these little rockets that are going down and winning space competitions in the United States today. So finding a place for them to stay is where we kind of need to go from here. But we really have done a good job in cultivating our youth and building that excitement in our workforce to go forward and be a part of this industry. So when you tap in what Telesat has been doing with the satellites and MDA and some of our other global leaders here, we really have become a resource for the globe, and we've positioned ourselves really well for going forward.
And Dave, I mean, I think we have to come to you now because, I mean, he's talked up the Canadian contributions to the astronaut program and how that's something that we're still developing. I've mentioned them already. My kids are quite young, but I remember on the news a picture of some astronauts, and one of them had a Canadian flag patch on the arm, and my little son went, huh. Like, it was just something like, oh, wow, okay, like these things matter, and they matter for kids, but they also matter for when we're getting to the university age. If you don't mind following a little bit on Stephen's comments there, from a guy who was inside the astronaut program and a guy who has now obviously stayed active in the sector afterward, what kind of benefits has Canada been getting from that decision that we wanted to be full partners in a manned presence in space?
Well, there's no question we're a major spacefaring nation as a result of that. You know, the image behind me shows the Canadarm, one of the amazing icons of Canadian space technology. I'm actually standing on the end of the Canadarm. I spent about 6.5 hours riding the end of the arm. It's an amazing piece of technology, but we know that what we do in space changes what we do on Earth. And going back to Michèle's earlier comment about bandwidth, bandwidth is absolutely critical to enable us to do virtual robotic surgery. So you could have a surgeon located in downtown Toronto operating in a patient in a remote community in northern Canada by virtue of high-speed telecommunications satellite technology that Telesat's able to provide. These things are absolutely amazing. But I think, you know, there's a really important aspect to stress here. The expertise that we have in Canada comes from the strength of our academic research programs and the strength of our universities. And if you go back to the late 1950s in the Arrow project, when that project was canceled, NASA sent a team up to hire those Arrow engineers. I just published a book on leadership moments in NASA's history. And, you know, we mentioned this in the book that there were between 20 and 30 engineers that were hired that went down to NASA that were part of building the Mercury, Gemini, the Apollo spacecraft. The flight surgeon who was on console when Neil Armstrong stepped on the surface of the moon, Bill Carpentier, was a Canadian flight surgeon. So we've been involved right from the beginning. And I think one of the important elements of this is creating these opportunities for students to be able to do research, to learn about the areas of space science that they're passionate in, and then for us to develop this flourishing economy based on innovative technology that is driven by the requirements of space exploration.
You know, you've mentioned the arrow, and I feel obligated to note that my grandfather wore a blue uniform for many years of his life, and mentioning the arrow means undoubtedly right now he's rolling around in his grave screaming Diefenbaker. So we won't get too much into that, but that was taken very personally in my family. Michèle, I want to come to you here because I think we've touched a little bit about the contributions Canada made with generating personnel and expertise in that front, but you've also already mentioned a multi-decade experience that you've been part of developing technological expertise and technologies and know-how in Canada. Again, we've got a long background we could cover here, but even within your own career, what have you seen on the technological front that allowed us to be where we are today?
Wow. So, you know, when I joined Telesat in the late 80s, we were involved in actually a fair amount of research and development, promoting the development of technologies, promoting, you know, new services. You know, we launched, and this came from some of the history and historical developments that Telesat did. We were the first satellite company to actually make use of satellite and deliver television services to the home directly using KU band, the KU band. So small dish service. You know, there was a whole massive market then that was developed thereafter, but Telesat was in fact the first to do so. It was interesting. We, in 2005, launched the first direct-to-user Ka-band high-speed internet service. And so again, this spoke to getting and delivering internet services to the most rural and remote areas of the country and giving them broadband connectivity through these small Ka-band dishes. Telesat actually pioneered. We were the first ones to have, you know, spec'd out that satellite, had it built, launched it, and launched the service. It's something that is just commonplace today. There are a number of firsts that Telesat undertook over, you know, its more than 50-year history. It's very impressive for a Canadian company to be so, what I would say, out there. I've been impressed throughout my career and the projects that I've been able to work on. And people are fascinated. You know, you talk about space, about rockets, about, you know, satellite communications. People are in awe. And I just want to, you know, digress just a little bit. We talked about our families. I have two daughters. One has graduated from university and is actually working on Canadarm3 and the Lunar Gateway projects. Proud mom there. And my second daughter is just about to graduate. She's in her fourth year of electrical engineering as well, with a vision of working in the space sector. So, you know, we're driving a whole new generation of young people that really see, you know, the capabilities, and they have a vision and they just want to be part of that as well. It's interesting technology and it's exciting.
Well, you know, speaking of proud parents, my kids are still young enough that they want to be a YouTube influencer and captain of the Maple Leafs. And I'm not honestly sure which one of those careers will lead to more heartbreak.
Well, my 20-year-olds want to be YouTube influencers as well. So
well, there you go. You know, guys, we wanted to move the conversation into the present. And I think we've kind of largely done that already. So I'm not sure we need to spend a ton of time talking about the present before we start talking a bit about the future. We've talked a little bit about the opportunities that brought us here. Jinjun, I'll come back to you. I'm curious, in the present moment now, we've covered some of the preamble. What do you think is happening right now that is something we need to build on? Like, and I just don't mean in Canada, I mean globally. What do policymakers and even members of the broader public need to understand about this moment for Canada in space?
So so I will go back to my original 2 points. One is investment, and the second one is people. because I think we really need to put more investment to Canadians' space program, and I think that is we bring our big future this will bring the bigger future potential in space for Canadians. So, and also another thing I want to say is, so the first one is I think we really need to say space costs a lot of money, but it does lead to great new technologies with a wide range of potential. I think we need to let people know that. Also, it is also a very sound investment for space community. So according to a report I just found recently, every dollar of NASA's budget has a bigger impact on the U.S. economy than other contributors. So it is estimated that the total economic benefit of each dollar spent on the space program has been between $8 to $10 range, which is good. And it also spurs technological advancements that contribute to our everyday lives. Without space program, we won't have GPS, we won't have accurate weather prediction, we won't have the UV filter on our sunglasses and also cameras. So I think there's a lot of things that space contribute to our daily lives. We really need to continue in this direction.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a long time criticism of space spending, and I don't need to tell this to you guys, is why are we spending all that money up there when we could be spending it here? Well, that's nonsense. We are spending it here. Like every dollar we've spent on space has been spent right here. And it's not, I mean, the economic multipliers are huge, obviously, but Michèle, just to feed back to something you had said there, how many undiscovered Mozarts are out there waiting for that ability to upload their creation to YouTube, but right now they don't have the broadband to do it? How many future engineers are going to be inspired by something they look at in a live stream? We can't necessarily put an economic value on this, but the cultural impact of this is incredible. Stephen, I let myself get a little romantic there for a second. Let's bring it right back down to the economics. You had said at the start that as you're hoping to break ground and get your facility operational, you're already getting letters of intent here. And I think we can talk about the future of the sector, but I think that's an interesting comment because it's telling us about the demand that exists right now, either the demand for services that is needed or demand that smart people managing big complex accounts think they're going to need imminently.
Yeah, I spoke to the commercialization of space and where things are going already. And I think the other component about where we are now that has made such a big difference as we're going forward is the miniaturization, the science and technology that has really developed today. We're no longer needing these 15, 20-ton satellites to go out to tens of thousands of kilometers to a geosynchronous orbit. And we can get so much technology packed into a CubeSat and run some amazing experiments. And once people realize, once the commercial industry realized how much science you can pack into something as small as that and get out there into space and collect data and do some things, not just the global broadband. Michèle's, their technology is certainly gone down in size to less than 1,000 kilograms for a satellite where it would have been, 5 to 10,000 kilograms before. But imagine the ability to measure the methane gas out west with small sets of these CubeSats. So the thing that has really changed is that we can get so much science on board any mission these days, whether it's a CubeSat or a small sat. And that's one of the real fundamental changes that's happened in the last 10 years since the shuttle landing.
Well, it's funny, Dave. I mean, I'm holding a supercomputer in my hand, right? I mean, this kind of technology, like I stick the collective sum of human knowledge in my back pocket every morning when I take the dog for a walk. And Stephen there talking about miniaturization and Michèle having mentioned the bandwidth capacity. You're talking about surgery, and one of the present obstacles we're working to overcome is latency. And I remember using some of the early satellite internet. It worked. You had to wait a while. You hit enter and then you waited, and then your Google results came. I've tinkered a little bit with Starlink, the new SpaceX offering. It's like using my phone, like the latency issues come down. You've mentioned surgery here for applications like that, where you need real-time connectivity. probably for the first time kind of now and in the last few years, we're really breaking through in a way where remote presence can be almost in real time, close enough probably to matter in most contexts.
There's no question. In the course of my career, I've had a chance to do some very interesting things, one of which was demonstrate virtual robotic surgery between McMaster University in Hamilton and the Aquarius Undersea Research Habitat 10 miles off the coast of Key Largo, Florida, 60 feet under the surface of the ocean. We had latencies of around 400 milliseconds between moving the robot in Hamilton and the robot moving underwater. You can definitely perform surgery with those types of latencies. If you're looking at the moon, it's a different story. The latencies there get into the range of seconds, but we've got ideas on how to solve that problem. But broadly speaking, this is about economic opportunity, and if we were to take the word space out of today's discussion and simply talk about economic growth, is there anybody interested in being part of a $350 billion global economy? I'd say the answer is yes. Oh, by the way, it's going to grow to 1.1 trillion in 20. Oh, I'm really interested in that. And that, I think, is the key message, that what we're doing in space drives the development of technologies that we can use on Earth. Leap Biosystems is a company that's developing augmented reality solutions for healthcare everywhere. Applications in northern Canada, remote medical communities, where we're basically trying to enhance the delivery of medical care. You can use it for the Canadian Forces, of course. You can use it in space. It's one of our primary applications. But I think that's what this is all about. We're arguably going to be one of the very few Canadian companies focusing on space medicine and the direct application of those medical technologies to enhance rural and medical care in Canada.
Well, I mean, Dave, if you'd mentioned before there was $350 billion on the table, I might have wanted to get to that faster. I had no idea that was up for grabs today. Michèle, I mean, Dave and Stephen talking about this, and Jinjun as well talking about the opportunity here. You are part of one of the legacy companies, I think we could say, a company with a long track record in this sector. You're also seeing a lot of new companies popping up here. What's your state on the current moment as we're generating this talent, and it's happening globally? And there's a push and a pull of us wanting the world's best and brightest. They want ours. Where do you see that going, or kind of as where it is now? We'll pivot to what's next in a moment, but what's the state of things kind of now?
So I would say the state of things now, there is a pivot to LEO, and that's global. I mean, everyone sees the excitement and the promise of low Earth orbit satellites, the fact that it's low latency, ultra broadband. Telesat has a long history of actually delivering these services. We're targeting specific market verticals for our service. And it's verticals that we've always mostly addressed with our legacy fleet. And so we're targeting, the terrestrial market. So providing broadband connectivity to communities, to wireless towers. So working hand in glove with ISPs, the telcos, the wireless cos, providing good quality and what we say carrier grade connectivity, so that we can connect the most remote and rural regions, not just in Canada, but around the world. And we've been providing that level of service using our GEO fleet today. We know how to do it. We have the processes, and we have the personnel. We are growing, and we actually have to, hire. We have to ensure that we're, enticing, and that we look. We're able to bring on board, people that have the right skill set and the right competencies, so that we can sort of continue to build out the facilities, not just here in Canada, but globally. So where we are today is we have the history, we have the capabilities, we've proven ourselves in terms of the GEO. We can prove ourselves on LEO. We're well on our way. And it's all about sort of, connecting that low latency ultra broadband. But with an SLA, we're targeting, the big customers, big pipe. We're not a direct to consumer model, which is best efforts.
I want to move the conversation very much into what's next here. And Michèle, your comment there about actually hiring, we're talking about incredibly high concept stuff here, really interesting, exciting stuff. I couldn't have believed some of this stuff 20 years ago. I'm a print journalist by profession. I've been in the media for 15 years. You talk about an industry that's hiring. That's the most shocking thing I've heard all day, completely outside of my context. You're seeing these incredible growth opportunities. I think it's just absolutely incredible. Jinjun, what do we do now? And I know it's a big question and we'll spend some time talking about it, but we've set the table of where we come from where we are. There is global competition on this. New companies are popping up. There are new countries either on a national or a commercial basis really entering the race, so to speak, the game. Obviously, with China and the United States as well, there's the possibility of a degree of geopolitical rivalry coming back, which we haven't had for a while. How does Canada position itself to go forward here? What's the next step?
So I do think Canada does have big future potential in space. Actually, we have many advanced space technologies developed over the past many years, including the Telesat and the Canadarm, RadarSat, and so on. However, we had to admit, so we have much more capabilities than we are currently using. This is the problem. So if we don't use them all, we just waste our capabilities and previous investment. So Canadians have participated in many international missions, such as the Phoenix Mars Lander mission and OSIRIS-REx asteroid sample return mission. And luckily, I have to say, the science PIs for both missions are all from my department. So this I'm proud of that. So I think that's something we can do better. So in the future, for example, Canada can lead its own planetary science missions in addition to participating in projects led by other nations. So how to realize this potential? I would say the answer is more funding, more investment, and more activities, either from government agencies or private companies to take advantage of our full range capability.
Steve, when you'd mentioned before, you're already talking with potential customers here. I mean, I as a business guy as well, we're talking space, but we got to talk business here. You've got your first batch of letters of intent. Where are you going to go out and get those next 10? Is this something that you're going to do in Canada? Is this global? Where's the demand for access to space going to come from?
The access to space for maritime launch services and our location in Nova Scotia, Spaceport Nova Scotia, is really founded in that location adage. I have to poke a bit of fun at one of our colleagues earlier today from south of the border, suggesting that they'll do the launches down there, and we should stay in our own sandbox. But I would point out that industry has changed, right? The low Earth orbit has opened up. We do need the global broadband and the range of inclinations that we can offer. If you look at what we have there with a launch site with a rocket that can carry 5 tons to LEO, with a 4-meter diameter fairing on it, with a location with a range of inclinations from 45 to 98 degrees, and with a stable country in the global broadband and the global aspects of North America, working with the U.S. satellite clients and the clients we have here in our country, the ability to get 20, 30 different satellites of one class on board one launch. You look at all those pieces that go together, and it's like, well, it's obvious that we've got a great spot in mind for this spaceport development, and we just need to grab the ring and go for it. And now we're building now we're not exporting satellites to launch. We're not exporting dollars to SpaceX and others to launch. We're keeping that money here. We're importing that money here. We have satellites coming from around the globe already. All of the ones that I spoke to you about that are letters of intent, those are each multi-launch. Some of them are 3 to 5 in just the initial discussions. So our manifest is nearly full, and we haven't even broken ground yet. That's what the real opportunity is. And what comes with that for the economic development for a rural area in Nova Scotia is just incredibly hard to fully realize what that impact is going to be for the job creation, for the tourism, and for that global focus on what's going on in Canada and that import of dollars here and students and capability here instead of being exported?
You know, we're going to be pivoting, folks, in just a couple of minutes to a bit of a Q&A session here. And Dave, a question has actually come in for you that happy coincidence. This is what I was planning to ask you about. So I'd ask Stephen there where the next customers come from, where the growth is. You'd mentioned earlier, just as we were kicking it off here, that you want to set an aspirational goal that Canada will be 10% of the space economy. Right now, we're about 5%. Well, okay, what's that next 5%? Where do we get there? And I mean, in terms of customers, I mean, in terms of sectors, but also kind of in the post-COVID era, we're going to have a period of economic recovery. Economic recovery is, on the one hand, hugely wonderful. It's a huge opportunity. It's also often painful as we rationalize available resources here. Our space sector is going to have to compete for internal domestic dollars here. So to get from 5 to 10, where do we get that? Is that coming from government grants? Is that coming from cooperation with the armed forces and other allied nations? Is that coming from the pure commercial sector here? Where do we get from 5 to 10?
You know, I think there's a lot of opportunities. Looking to the government for dollars is the traditional response for additional funding. I think really the challenge for startup businesses is to look at the market that exists and to capture a significant portion of that market and develop that market in a manner that's meaningful for terrestrial applications. So LEAP is a company with augmented reality solutions. We're collaborating with ADGA in Ottawa. We are getting government funding through the IRAP program, but ultimately the market for the technology that we're developing is both the terrestrial clinical market and also potentially a military market as well. We're collaborating with 2 companies in the United States, Axiom Aerospace and Exa Aerospace, both of which are very exciting collaborations. And what I'd love to see is that, you know, it's almost like a frontier mentality in the US right now with the rapid growth in the private sector space companies and the hiring that's going on. I think it would be great to see that spread to Canada in this post-economic recovery period. But I think it comes down to all of us as CEOs of these companies to create market plans and business strategies that enable us to grow, develop a new economic stimulus for the country, but also create new jobs and hire talented individuals in to grow our organizations.
Michèle, David just mentioned there a bit of that wild west thing going on, and I had mentioned something a minute or two ago with kind of a bit of maybe a return of geopolitical rivalry to some of these space-based initiatives for your company and the projects you're looking at here. What are your strategic opportunities in the next 10 years as we see recovery coming, and also with more and more countries getting into this, and possibly some of that not being the most friendliest basis here? What are you guys also wary of as you look ahead 10, 15 years?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that there are a number of countries and backed by their regional governments that are developing technologies that will be competing directly with our Telesat Lightspeed service. They are sort of well backed. You know, there is always a concern of acting sort of in the Wild West and perhaps not following all of the, you know, typical regulatory frameworks that at least under the geosynchronous world and how we operated sort of in our legacy world, that they'll be operating under those same more regimented guidelines. That is a bit of a concern. You know, a lot of the governments will require coordination. You know, many of these constellations plan on operating within the same spectrum bands. And so coordination will need to take place. And hopefully, you know, the administrations and the areas that we operate will help us operate our services. You know, I think that's what I would say there. It's
It's well, no, there's a lot there. I mean, he's not just talking about the spectrum crowding there. When I go up to that cottage, I look up at that sky where I saw that satellite so long ago. There's a lot of them now. It's a busier sky than it used to be, and it's visually apparent. So that's something we're going to be working on. I want to move it into a Q&A here, guys, and we've gabbed a bit too much, so I'm going to have to accelerate the Q&A here. I'm going to throw a question at each of you, and I'm going to try and tailor one that's come into the audience to who I think might be best able to take it. Jinjun, I want to come to you on this because there's been a question about the workforce, and you've mentioned with some pride there about your own students and your own colleagues at the university and the work they're doing. Two related questions for you here, one right after the other. Do we have domestically enough of a pipeline of talent coming out that we can meet the growth demands? If not, where are we going to get it?
Yeah, my simple answer to your question is actually we don't have the pipeline. And I would say, so in order to solve the problem, I think we need to create more opportunities and funding for students and young professionals in the Canadian space sector. So actually, I can use our unique space engineer program as an example. Actually, our program is among the top 50 and has attracted students worldwide. However, because of lacking opportunities in Canada, so many graduates moved to other countries, ESA, US, and Asia, so taking their skills, knowledge, and talent with them. So I think that is a major concern for me. So as I mentioned earlier, in the past, the reason why we success, one is investment, one is people. And if we lose the high qualified personnel or highly skilled people in space sector, and we will lose the game.
You know, Stephen, I'll follow up on that directly with you because one of the other questions that's come into us is about recruiting, just pure workforce recruiting. As you guys are getting to the point where you're going to have to begin that build out in a big way, what are you seeing? It's a very open-ended question, but when you're looking for the right tools, the right talent, where are you going to find it here? I mean, are you finding that you're having, kind of, as Jinjun was saying, are you having to look further afield? Now, you've mentioned you're out in rural Nova Scotia, so I don't expect you to just grab everybody you needed in the nearest town, but where are you looking for the talent and where are you having to bring it in from?
There's a significant number of Canadian talent that have exported that want to come home. You should see my inbox. The folks that want to get out of New Zealand, the US, Europe, wherever it is that they're working right now, and they want to get back to where they belong. We've been working with Dalhousie, St. Francis Xavier University, and other schools here, working with the Canadian Space Agency as a CubeSat program with all the universities right now. That is really a pipeline for some talent that's coming out. And I don't see us having to tap any of the resources outside of Canada to be able to achieve rocket launch. There are some specialty pieces along the way that we can get some help with, but as far as building and operating and running our launch site, that talent does reside here, and they're really ready to go.
I want to, Dave, this is a question, it's wildly off topic, but I have to ask this one to you here. We've mentioned it already, but I want to ask the guy who's taking a couple jaunts up there. We've got a crew that we expect, God willing, will be up there, 4 brave souls heading up this evening. What do you feel when you see a crew go up there, especially as we are moving into this new era here? I'm sure it brings back some memories, but when you see tonight the launch, what goes through your mind at a moment like that?
Tremendous excitement, pride for what Canada's achieved in space, but it's just anyone that's been to space is always thrilled when we see more humans getting a chance to go forward and explore space. Humans are a spacefaring species. We will send humans back to the moon. We will send humans to Mars. 100 years from now, space travel will become relatively routine. You know, if you think where commercial aviation was 100 years ago, and then you fast forward 100 years from now, arguably that's where low Earth orbit will be. So it's all about growth and opportunity. You know, for LEAP Biosystems, we would love to be able to start hiring people. We don't have the revenue flow to be able to support that right now. We're happy that we survived COVID. We're a small startup. We've only been in business for 3 years. And, you know, it's tough as a startup organization to be able to get that footprint, to develop the sustained cash flow you need to be able to employ more people. But I think it's really about creating jobs, creating economic growth, using space as an opportunity for us to consider how we can do things differently. And that's one of the reasons why the private space economy is growing so rapidly in the US. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity to bring that growth to Canada.
You know, Michèle, here's a question that's come in that I have to ask you here. And I mean, it's almost an unfair question. So I ask it somewhat mischievously, but we're talking about the opportunities. You've talking about GEO. We're looking at LEO here. What about further afield here? We're talking about a return to the moon. We're talking about that relatively soon. We're talking about, God willing, touch wood, pushing out further into the solar system, probably within a reasonable time frame here. What opportunities are you guys looking at? What will be the first Telesat operation in lunar orbit, for instance? What are you guys looking at when you talk about kind of getting beyond this little blue marble of ours and going out a bit further?
Well, so we are looking at opportunities where we're providing a communications path for all of these types of programs. So anything that is flying sort of below our LEO constellation. So our LEO constellation satellites fly between 1,000 and 1,300 kilometers from the Earth's surface. There will be, either satellites, the new space stations, and so on and so forth. They need to be able to communicate. And so we will be using our LEO constellation just to help basically funnel those communications, and for Earth observation satellites, using our constellation to bounce all of that information off of our satellites and land it. So we're the communications path, basically the gateway to the ground for all of these space-based either satellites or, vessels or other programs flying around. That's what we see in the future. Yeah.
I remember reading a couple of years ago. I mean, it was an obvious insight, but it hadn't occurred to me that before, with all the probes we've sent to Mars and around the moon. There are other bodies in the solar systems that now have satellite constellations, and it just hadn't occurred to me before. But there's a robotic presence not just around this world, but others as well. And I have a bit of an eye for history here, and it occurs to me that we're just at the start of something incredible. Like who would have thought it? Watch at Kitty Hawk, watching that, that first bumpy little ride, to think where we'd be today, right? The first person in my family to ever take flight was my grandfather, and he did it because his country needed him to go to war in an aluminum can that was riddled with bullet holes every time it came back from a mission. 2 human lifetimes later, look what we're talking about right now. It's just absolutely incredible, and I think the best, I hope, is yet to come. We're going to begin wrapping things up, guys. I want to give everybody an opportunity to do a bit of a quick lightning round here. We'll stay in the same order. In less than a minute each, just give me a concluding thought. We've talked about so much today, but I know there is so much we haven't talked about, so much we could have talked about, but didn't have the opportunity. So let's just do a quick wrap up from each of you. And again, I don't have a buzzer, but I will ask you to stay on time here. In less than a minute each. Jinjun, what is the one thing you wish we'd had more time to talk about today?
Okay, so first, thank you for giving me this opportunity to participate in this panel to discuss the future of space program in Canada. So as we know, space exploration helps address the fundamental questions about our place in the universe and also the history of our solar system. And space technology is improving our daily lives and making the world a better place. Through this panel discussion, it is clear that in order to maintain and grow Canada's leadership in position in space, there are many things that need to be done. So again, in my opinion, people are the key. In particular, the highly skilled people are the key of the equation. So we really need to highlight the impact that highly skilled personnel are making and how they are dependent on the investment in the fundamental research. So I think the math is really simple. Investing in research equals investing in people. So I think I will conclude that.
Stephen, same question to you. What is the one thing you want people to take away from our chat here today?
That we have, I would agree with Dr. Shan that the people aspects there is really the most important part. I began my career, working as a NASA engineering manager for NASA, and I was honored to be a part of a program called the Science Advisor Program. I was able to go into the schools and do experiments with these kids, take a shuttle RCS engine in with me, piece of space shuttle tile, and really get these kids wild, getting them looking up into space and seeing the stars. And we're really committed to that with the Maritime Launch Services effort in Nova Scotia. We're working with the First Nations community. We're working with already with the high school in Canso, doing summer programs in Antigonish. That to me is what we're doing here, is we're trying to build our future. When I look back at what Dr. Williams talked about with the past shuttle programs and his experience with what is going on with the launch tonight, it's that huge number of people behind the scenes that are really carrying the water, that are doing all this work to provide this incredibly safe, environmentally aware space program that we're going forward with today. So it really is that human capital.
Dave, you probably see this question coming because I've asked it twice already. What do you want people to leave the event today thinking of? What do you hope stays on their mind?
So I'd love people to think about our role, our historic legacy as a major spacefaring nation, and the opportunity that we have to be able to grow our influence in that global space economy, to create those new jobs, to basically stimulate the Canadian private space sector to grow, to meet these opportunities that are coming in the future. I think it's a future that's very exciting. I think it's a future that's filled with opportunity. And I would love to see more Canadian companies in the sector collaborating together to make sure that Canada is able to leave a significant footprint on that global space economy.
Michèle, it would be cruel for me to throw a curveball question at you after asking the other three the same one. So one more time with feeling, what would you like people to leave today thinking about, or what's an issue you just want to leave people with?
Well, I just, Telesat in Canada itself, because we've been backed by, the federal government as well as the provincial governments, we're just about to embark on the largest and most ambitious space program ever conceived here in Canada with our Lightspeed service. And it's going to be the most cutting edge broadband satellite network in the world. We've included some of the most cutting edge advanced technologies in that network. And it's going to, bridge the digital divide. It will provide significant economic benefit to those living in rural and remote parts of Canada. It's going to create hundreds, if not thousands of jobs across this country. It's going to spur domestic investment and export. So you have to imagine that, we are a Canadian owned and operated company. We're providing these global services. We're exporting all of this satellite capacity with the benefits all coming back into Canada. We're at the forefront of this highly competitive, rapidly growing new space economy. And this is really exciting time for Telesat, but also for Canada, actually to kind of lead the way and continue to grow in the space sector.
Guys, this has been absolutely terrific, and I hope you stick around for just a couple of minutes. I do want to note, I realize with some self-consciousness as we're all here together talking about cutting-edge technology, the next iteration of human advancement. I realize I've been tinkering as a nervous habit with a Paw Patrol pencil the entire time. It's a bit of a mix of the high and the low. But before I let you guys go, I want to offer, obviously, my thanks to you for this, but I also want to bring in, just for a couple of minutes, I want to bring in Tim Murphy, partner of project finance in P3. And Tim, I've told everybody today, I am reading the titles. I'm not even trying to pretend otherwise. I don't want to get anything wrong. So yeah, I'm looking at notes. You're with Macmillan, and you and Macmillan helped make this event possible today. So I want to thank you, because this has been an incredible break from nonstop election coverage. This is just a complete palate cleanser for me. I do want to give you the floor for a couple of minutes here. Thanks so much for helping pull this on, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. And, Macmillan is very proud to be a sponsor of this event, along with our space law team led by Brett Stewart and James Monroe. And I've been asked to speak because some of you may know I served as a chief of staff to a prime minister, and we sat around the table, thinking about what aspects of our economy can best contribute. And, I would say space and aerospace kind of ticks all those boxes, but isn't always seen publicly as doing that. And I think these kind of events contribute to that. But you think about it, what you say, you want a sector of the economy that can really contribute and expand our investment in research and development. And frankly, it's a sector that does at a much higher rate than many other sectors in the economy. And we're seeing that in the companies like LEAP and Maritime Launch. And you want it to be an export leader, and space and aerospace actually exceeds other areas in terms of how well. You want it to be a leader globally, and we are the 5th largest, sector, aerospace sector in the world. You want it to be a talent attractor and developer, and and that it's exactly, that you see that in universities like York University, where we're able to attract some amazing people. And then you want it to be an area that generates high quality, high paying jobs. Well, it's among the highest paying jobs because the engineering backgrounds and the skills you're asking people. And finally, you want it to be an enabler of economic growth. And think about the spin-offs it's creating, like LEAP is in healthcare, or enabling broadband as a fundamental aspect of the economy. And so, I think about that, and I think then about, and we've talked about it off and on, about how government should be playing a role. And I think there's 4 of them, right? It's got an enabler role to help enable it. It has a regulator role, obviously, but that's, complicated in a global world with the cooperation and the security issues, but it also has an investor and funder role. And finally, I think a champion role, which it started very early on with companies like Telesat. And so, one of the things when I came out of politics I did was get involved in public-private partnerships of how to put the public and private together in a way that advanced the goals of both. I'm doing that for the last 15 years. And actually, Canada is a leader in that sector too, in devising the mechanics about putting those things together. And I hear you all talk about, the opportunity both for the public and the private sector to work, but the private sector too, to come together and really lead. And so it's I think, been a real lesson for me to listen to each of you and the talent and enthusiasm, skill, and investment of time and effort that you're making in this. And so we're just extremely proud at Macmillan to be a player in this space, having devised, from the very earliest days to actually helping draft one of these partnership agreements between a major aerospace company in the sector. But thank you very much for your effort and involvement today, and all of the panelists. And I want to obviously thank the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and Perrin Beatty for being the organizer, and Perrin doing his usual job, being a great voice for the business sector in public policy and government. With that, I'll turn it back to either Matt or Perrin as appropriate. But thank you, panelists. I really appreciate it.
Well, Tim, I'll take it just for a minute here, and I'll thank you for that. I want to make a specific point of doing 2 things, well, 3 things really. First of all, as Tim had said, thanking the Chamber for this opportunity. It's been a lot of fun. I really, the second thing I want to do is I want to thank our panelists, Stephen Mateer, Michèle Beck, Dr. Dave Williams, and Dr. Jinjun Shan. It's been an honor and a privilege to talk to you guys today. It's also been fun, which is not everything, which I've not been able to say that a lot the last 18 18 months of covering the daily news. So this has been a rare pleasure. The third really important thing I want to do is I want to brag, because we're actually wrapping this thing up almost to the minute on time, and that has never happened to me in a panel experience before. So I just wanted to flag that as a remarkable accomplishment. But thank you everyone for your time today. Thanks to Harrison and Christy for inviting me. Like I said, it was a lot of fun. I think my last note, Perrin, before I hand it off to you, will simply to say 4 people blasting off tonight. My thoughts are with them, and my hopes are with them, and I hope for a smooth, safe, and happy mission for them, and I'll certainly be watching. And that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much, Perrin Beatty, the Honorable Perrin Beatty, in fact, of the Canadian Chamber. I turn the floor over to you. Thank you so much for this.
Matt, thanks very much. And Tim, thank you very much for your comments earlier. Matt, what a great job you did moderating, and what an incredible panel that you had. The discussion was absolutely fascinating. We're coming, sadly, to the end of today's summit. And as we wrap up, I want to comment on 2 themes that struck me today. The first is that we as Canadians, and indeed as people, can feel very proud of all that we've accomplished so far when it comes to pushing the boundaries and the limits of flight. When you think back, right from the first small steps at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and Beck, Nova Scotia, to those other first small steps on another world, it's truly incredible, the advancements in aviation, aerospace, and space exploration over the course of the last century. That was a point that was underscored by that last panel, and they were absolutely correct. It wasn't very long ago that kids dreamt that maybe one day they'd be able to catch an airplane to fly to a neighboring town. Today, kids are dreaming about setting foot on other worlds. And in all likelihood, some of them will get to do it. This amazing transformation is the second theme that stood out to me today. Dreaming of what's possible for the future has never been more exciting than it is today. It's literally true that the concepts of science fiction are now becoming science fact. We're gearing up to send people back to the moon. Human missions to Mars are being seriously mapped out. Next generation telescopes are soon going to be searching for the origins of life and maybe answer the eternal question of whether we're alone. And intertwined with each of these objectives is the fact that Canada is playing a leading role. When human beings return to the moon, currently slated for a flight in 2023, a Canadian will be there. That will make us just the second country on Earth to have a person orbit the moon. When the James Webb Space Telescope, which is widely regarded as Hubble's successor, launches later this year and begins its search of the cosmos, it will be running on critical components made here in Canada. And when we finally embark on the journey to Mars, sometime in the next decade, there's every reason to expect that Canadians will be playing important roles once again. The challenge before us now as Canadians is that none of these missions, none of these new technologies, none of these achievements is inevitable. To realize the potential requires investment, dedication, and continuing to offer the tools to the next generation to build the future that we all want to see. Now, I hope that today has helped inspire some ideas and provide direction to our leaders to help to get there. I want to offer a very personal note of thanks to everyone who participated today. We had a truly stellar lineup. You've all taken time out of your busy schedules to lend your expertise to our audience. That's greatly appreciated. Thank you as well to our sponsors who've generously provided the support that we need to be able to offer events like this free of charge to our audience. Your support of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is invaluable, and we appreciate it enormously. And then finally, a day like today wouldn't exist without an audience. Thank you to everyone for listening in and for spending your day with us. We appreciate your comments, your questions, and your insights. I hope that some of you will join us again soon for another Chamber event. To find our upcoming events, just go to chamber.ca/events. Now, on behalf of the entire Canadian Chamber team, I'm Perrin Beatty, and I thank you for joining us today for our Executive Summit. Our future in space is now.